All right, this one is making some Seahawks fans mad. I just chuckle. I find it funny. Sam Darnold, Brock Purdy, two 49ers quarterbacks, or at least two quarterbacks with 49ers history. Obviously, Sam Darnold is now a rival in the NFC West, but he is lavishing a lot of praise on Brock Purdy. And I think it's breaking the brains of a lot of the Seahawks trolls online who are thinking that all of a sudden they've got some kind of QB advantage in the NFC West. But, more than anything, it's a good opportunity for us to look into the dynamics of the 49ers quarterback room and the franchise, because so many people have said, well, quarterbacks want to go to San Francisco to play under Kyle Shanahan and rehab their career. People even said they want to go to San Francisco to play under Brian Griese to rehab their career. We know that Mac Jones is now a 49er. I would argue that maybe the strongest appeal of all for QBs to join the 49ers is a chance to play and be in the same room and, QB room and practice with Brock Purdy. Jennifer Lee Chan had a chance to catch up with Sam Darnold, and, just let's read some of this praise, because again, whenever we have a chance to go behind the scenes of how stuff works in the meeting room, how stuff works in the building, that's going to give us the very best insight into the 49ers. And I thought that Jennifer got some tremendous quotes here from Sam Darnold, who said, Brock helped me a ton with certain things of how to prepare, and even just watching him play, just how he processes on the field and all those things. First of all, I think his poise, whether he made a good play, a bad play, you celebrate on the field with your teammates, you get pumped, but then you come right back to the sideline and you have the same demeanor. That was something I always admired about Brock. And then the other thing is how he prepared. I say this all the time, but I give Brock a ton of credit in showing me the ropes that way. He showed me so much in how to prepare and how to study. He was so helpful that way. The NFL, we're reminded again here, is about preparation. Everyone is good at this level. Like, everyone has talent. Case in point, Sam Darnold was the number 3 overall pick, just like Trey Lance was the number 3 overall pick a few years later. So there's obviously physical characteristics about both Lance and Darnold, and everybody drafted in the top 5 that makes them quote unquote special. But then you look at pick number 262, Brock Purdy, and he turned into an MVP finalist in his second season in the league. And he has traits that make him elite as well. And not just mental traits, physical traits. We talk about the 10-yard split for Brock Purdy. He moves as quickly in the first 10 yards as somebody who runs a 4.4 40. So if everybody from pick number 3 to pick number 262 has some sort of elite physical trait, and I think you do to play in this league, in the National Football League, the way that you're going to separate yourself is the way that you prepare. And I think so many rookies don't fully grasp that entering the league, because in college and in high school and all lower levels of football, you were able to just use your ability to dominate people. But once you get to the NFL and everybody was the first or the second best player on their college team, once that happens, it is a cold bucket of water to the face. So when Sam Darnold is talking about that he learned how to prepare from Brock Purdy, I give Brock a ton of credit in showing me the ropes that way. He showed me so much in how to prepare and how to study. He was so helpful in that way. And then he keeps on going right here. Obviously, you think you're spending more time in the facility and you're going over the plays. You think you're doing a good job, especially when I was a young quarterback in New York. But I think that understanding how to do it was the most important thing for me. I feel like Brock and Brandon Allen as well really showed me the ropes on how to better prepare as a quarterback in this league. And I'm going to take that with me for the rest of my career. We'll get to the next part here in just a second. But you heard people say the same thing about Brady, right? All the greats, the preparation was on point, but then just being around them helped so many other quarterbacks and so many other coaches. Like Mick Lombardi was around Tom Brady. Mick was a coach in 2019. He was I think he was a receivers coach for the Patriots. And I think he might have done 1 year in the QB room in 2019, which was Brady's last year there. He was exposed to how this guy operates. So now Mick Lombardi, who's the 49ers quarterbacks coach, is going to be able to take some of the ideas, some of the influence that he got from 2019, which is obviously invaluable, and he's going to be in the same room as Brock Purdy. And I'm sure he can impart some of that knowledge, but he can also take more knowledge from Brock Purdy and he could pass it down, just like Brock Purdy is going to be passing some knowledge down to Mac Jones. Brock knows how to prepare. He has this even-keeled demeanor that is truly one of the highlights of who he is. Never too high, never too low. We saw the 2023 season where Brock was an MVP finalist. Obviously, 95% of that season were highs, right? But the 5% that were lows, there was the game with all the tipped interceptions against Baltimore, might have cost him the MVP award. What did Brock do from that point on? He started dominating again. The very next week at Washington, he had an awesome game. So he didn't let the low take him too low. He never let the highs take him too high. You know, I have a story, and this is a Sam Darnold, Brock Purdy story. And this is from the game over at Washington. This was New Year's Eve in Washington, whatever they call it, FedEx Field. It's not over at RFK anymore. It's at FedEx Field. And George Kittle's walking around on the field before the game. And Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold this is way before even passing warm-up start. This is just when the players are laying on the grass and they're stretching out. They're getting a feel for the stadium. Sometimes they've got those resistance bands, right? And George Kittle's walking around. He's pacing around. He's doing his own thing. He's limbering up for the 49ers. And he walks by Brock and Sam. And George just starts laughing. He just starts chuckling to himself. And it's because he hears Sam Darnold rapid fire quizzing Brock Purdy. It's like, okay, hey, what do you do if you see this coverage? If it's cover 3, what are we doing? What's the rule in this game? Sam is not even slated to start that game against Washington. But he is rapid fire quizzing Brock Purdy. He's using every second of Brock's more free time before the game to get a little bit more intel from Brock Purdy, appreciating who he's working with, a little bit more intel on what to do in any single situation. Playing quarterback, especially if you hear Brady talk about it, was more about being prepared than anything else. He said when he carved up the Chiefs in Super Bowl 55, so much of that was him knowing the answers to the test before the game even started. So he was ready at every snap. He knew exactly where the ball was going to go. He was ready based on the coverage, based on the rotations, based on the Bucs' own alignment. He was ready with where to go. So George Kittle's walking around the field in Washington, and he hears Sam Darnold just quizzing Brock Purdy. And he just starts chuckling to himself, and he's like, this is amazing. Sam is getting the absolute most out of this opportunity with Brock Purdy, who was in the middle of an MVP finalist season. The next week, the 49ers, who had clinched, obviously, right after that game against Washington when Philadelphia lost the game at home to Arizona. The next week, Sam got his chance to start. He played well against the Rams. That was the Week 18 game. That parlayed into a fairly big contract it was a mid-sized contract, but it was a lot more than he was making with the 49ers, with the Minnesota Vikings. And Sam Darnold turned into Minnesota's starter for a year. They went 14-3, and then he earned even bigger money, $30+ million a year, with the Seattle Seahawks. Now he's in the NFC West, and now it all comes full circle as he is praising Brock Purdy. We'll finish up the look at the Sam Darnold quotes here. I think that's the biggest thing that I learned going there, was just to trust the progressions. And if something is not there, trust it and move on to the next one and the next one, Darnold said. If that's not there, then be able to make a play potentially, but understand where my outs are. If I'm hot, understand where my hot is. That's a hot read. If I need to hang in the pocket, understand where I could potentially throw the ball away if there's pressure. They taught me so much about playing good football, and I'm forever thankful for my time there. I cannot underscore enough playing good football, playing safe football. we have to look at a chart here. And this is really cool because I think it shows some parallels between Darnold and Purdy. So Steve Patton posted this, and you'll notice that Purdy's on an extreme end of things. You'll notice that Darnold is not far away from him. You'll notice that Matthew Stafford, CJ Stroud, Bo Nix are all in a similar spot. So what is this chart about? This is unblocked pressure rate. The further to the right a quarterback is, the more unblocked pressures he faces. The y-axis, the vertical axis, is hit rate. The further up you are, the more often you get hit. So I think a knee-jerk reaction for people when they see this chart is to say, oh boy, the 49ers offensive line, look at that. Look how much unblocked pressure Brock Purdy is facing. And if that's your reaction, I'll say that you're onto a little bit of this, but you're only partially onto this. You're not fully onto this, because let me point something out. Purdy faced unblocked pressure 9% of the time last year, which was the highest rate in the league. However, Bo Nix from Denver, CJ Stroud from Houston, Sam Darnold, we're just talking about him from Minnesota, and Matthew Stafford weren't all that far behind at about 8%. They were the other four quarterbacks facing the 5 highest unblocked pressure rates in the league. And the 49ers offensive line was ranked mediocre when it came to pass block win rate. The Texans offensive line and the Broncos offensive line and the Vikings offensive line were all excellent units. In fact, Denver's offensive line and Minnesota's offensive line ranked number 1 and 2 respectively in pass block win rate. So let's get this straight. Bo Nix and Sam Darnold faced top 5 unblocked pressure rates despite the fact that their offensive lines ranked in the top 2. What does that tell us? That tells us that this chart right here, your spot on moving left and right, is not entirely dependent on your offensive line. In fact, I would surmise that it tells us that unblocked pressure is something that certain schemes let in intentionally, on purpose, more often than others, just because it's a simple mathematical numbers game. If you let a guy in unblocked, but you trust your quarterback to identify him, toughen up, and make a throw, even if he might get hit, or even if that guy is coming right down the barrel, you are probably going to have a numbers advantage on the other end, because the defense can only have 11 players on the field. If the defense uses one of those 11 players to get after the quarterback, and you don't use one of your 11 on offense to block him, there's a chance that, or a higher chance that, one of your 11 is going to be open. Look at the quarterbacks with the highest unblocked pressure rate and then consider the play callers. Shanahan for Purdy, Sean Payton for Bo Nix. For CJ Stroud, it was Bobby Slowick last year. He obviously is not going to be the play caller there anymore. He's out as Houston's offensive coordinator. Sean McVay for Matthew Stafford in LA, and Kevin O'Connell for Sam Darnold in Minnesota. All of those coaches come from, I would argue, somewhat related schematic trees. In the case of Slowick, he had descended directly from Shanahan. In the case of McVay, I think he descended directly from Shanahan. O'Connell descended directly from McVay, so there's relation to Shanahan. And we know that every one of these guys looks up to Sean Payton, who's like an elder statesman in the room. They all take plays from Sean Payton. Sean Payton takes plays from them. So when you look at the fact that, you know, 2 of these offensive lines are top 2 offensive lines, and these 5 play callers are all related in some way, I think it's really, really obvious that there is intentional unblocked pressure happening, and we see it on tape. That is, in fact, a big level of trust in these quarterbacks. So I don't think that Purdy would be this high if the 49ers offensive line pass protected a little bit better. I don't think this is entirely by design. I think you probably want Purdy's dot to be exactly where Sam Darnold's is, right? Maybe lessen that pressure, unblocked pressure rate by 1.5 points. But for the most part, Brock Purdy has been excellent against unblocked pressure. I could think of so many great examples going all the way back to 2022, his first action against Miami. Remember, Jalen Phillips was coming off the edge and Purdy threw blind to George Kittle. I mean, I would argue that that was the moment that people needed to start paying attention. Like, Purdy obviously still had a lot to prove beyond that moment, but when Miami was just trying to light him up with every single blitz imaginable after Jimmy Garoppolo broke his foot, and they sent Jalen Phillips off the edge, and the 49ers didn't pick him up, but the hot route, the blind read, was George Kittle on third down, and Purdy with ice in his veins just connected, no problem. I mean, that caused me to sit up in my seat, right? And we saw him do it against Tampa Bay the next week. And then, I still remember when Wake Martindale came in week 3. That's the New York Giants defensive coordinator back in 2023. Thursday Night Football, Levi's Stadium. He was throwing the most exotic blitz packages imaginable in Brock Purdy's direction. And it was a bit of a slow start for the 49ers in that game. But in the second half, they threw another one of those crazy blitz packages, and Purdy basically threw blind 35, 40 yards, pylon, Deebo Samuel, perfectly placed ball. And, I just think of all these unblocked pressures that he's beaten. There's obviously some that he hasn't. And I think that the Super Bowl, they faced a few too many in the Super Bowl. There were 9 in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. But so much of this goes back to Shanahan's trust in Purdy being able to deliver when he's got an extra rusher coming after him, because Shanahan believes in Purdy's processing power. The same way that it looks like Kevin O'Connell believed that Sam Darnold would be able to deliver in that system. Bo Nix, exciting young quarterback for the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton has that trust in him. Bobby Slowick treated C.J. Stroud in a similar way to Brock Purdy. The results weren't the same, though, for C.J. Stroud in year 2. So Slowick is out. We'll see what happens with the Texans. And obviously, Stafford is entrusted to do it. He's got a quick release and a really strong arm, but that's how McVay works in LA. Anyway, I thought that was a cool thread of commonality between Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold statistically, because there's, again, a very cool thread of commonality between these two quarterbacks right now when it has come to their affinity for each other. Sam Darnold talking the way that he did about the influence that Brock Purdy had on him as a quarterback really, I think, gives us even deeper insight into Brock. Should make people who are following Mac Jones's career excited, because Mac Jones, I think, can have something to learn. I was out at OTAs last week, and I've already told this story, but Kyle Shanahan has talked so much about how much he wants Mac to have fun. I pay attention when Kyle says stuff, right? I think it's really important to listen to key words. And he said a lot about Mac enjoying football. It's important that he enjoys football. And that stood out to me because I don't really hear Kyle Shanahan say that all too much. I think that oftentimes first-round draft picks who haven't had a whole lot of success in the league, who have been considered busts in a way, and Sam Darnold definitely was when he came to the 49ers. He'd been with 2 separate teams, so very similar trajectory as Mac Jones. I think a lot of times all of the fun that the game used to be for those guys has been sucked away. And it's really hard to passionately apply yourself to something if you're not enjoying it. If it truly is just a tedious job, it's going to be hard to be great at something. Michael Jordan enjoyed kicking people's asses. And because he really embraced it, he fully bought into it. I'm sure Kobe Bryant was the same way. I'm sure Steph Curry is the same way. There's got to be some level of enjoyment, right? And if you've been steamrolled over your first few years in the league, there's probably not going to be a whole lot of enjoyment. So Kyle Shanahan's talking about all the fun that Mac Jones needs to have. He needs to enjoy this. So I'm watching Mac, and he finds Juwan Jennings it was a little further down the progression. It wasn't an early read. Jennings on a deep crosser hits Jennings, big gain. You don't know if it's a touchdown or not because it's practice, and they kind of just blow the play dead right away, and there's no live tackling. But I just see Mac just pumping his fist. I don't see many quarterbacks pumping their fist, getting excited at practice, but good for him. He's spent the past few weeks studying technique, studying a new system. 49ers are trying to unlock that fun by, I think, rebuilding his confidence after a rough few years. The last couple in Jacksonville, the last one in Jacksonville, before that in New England. And, if he's pumping his fist at 49ers practice, if he's having a good time out on that practice field, I think he's starting to approximate what Kyle Shanahan wants of him. He's been in the room with Brock Purdy, just like Sam Darnold was in the room with Brock Purdy. Now, as far as what does Brock look like? What's the next step for Brock Purdy? Because I think that's what's probably most important for the 49ers and their immediate 2025 prospects. And to that, I had one observation from OTAs that I think is worth relaying, and I haven't said this one yet. Mick Lombardi, the new quarterbacks coach, is a lot more vocal than Brian Griese. He's there barking instructions, and I think the hope for the 49ers is Griese, obviously a fantastic quarterbacks coach. He was the perfect coach for Purdy, for Darnold, for Jimmy Garoppolo back in 2022. I think he helped Trey Lance a lot. And obviously Lance was way behind both Purdy and Darnold, but I think he helped him a lot in that 2023 training camp and in that offseason. Brandon Allen was in the room too for the 49ers. Tanner Mordecai. I think that if you talked about the quarterback coach the 49ers needed for that portion of Brock Purdy's career, for that portion of Sam Darnold's career, it was Brian Griese, because this was somebody who succeeded John Elway in Denver, was familiar with the Shanahan system, had perspective beyond the walls of a football building because he had been an announcer before then, but had been looked at, in a way as the next hope for the Broncos, right? They drafted him to replace John Elway. So he knew pressure. And then he had a decently successful NFL career in his own right. This was a guy that was the predecessor to Tom Brady at Michigan before he was the successor to John Elway with the Denver Broncos. So this is a guy who had lived and breathed the life of a quarterback and the pressure that entails. So he was able to give these two guys some real, almost like dad's advice. Been there before. It's like man's advice for how to handle one of the most rigorous jobs in professional sports, maybe the most challenging job in professional sports. And when we talk about how much of an even keel Brock Purdy has, and then we hear Sam Darnold talking about the even keel that he picked up from Brock Purdy, I think a lot of that also has to be credited to Brian Griese, who's able to show the quarterbacks how to handle themselves on a personal level so they could be focused and ready to attack the QB job. Now you move on to Mick Lombardi, who comes at this not from a quarterback's background, but from a coach's background. So the fact that he comes at this from a coach's background means that Purdy, I think the 49ers hope this is going to unlock the next step in his development. Purdy is already a vet. He's been paid. He's got a $265 million contract. It's not about shepherding him along as a rookie anymore. It's more about, okay, how do the 49ers constantly stay ahead of the competition in the year-by-year chess match? And that's what this is now evolving into. So I'm here at practice and I'm watching Mick Lombardi, and I would say that he's more vocal than Brian Griese. I think that there is more of a, okay, here, you go there, you go there. They're running a more scientific X's and O's approach even to the drills. So you could see the coaching influence bleeding into the quarterback drills more than it did before. And I think that if Brian Griese was the right quarterbacks coach at the right time for Brock Purdy at the start of his career, it's going to be really interesting to see if Mick Lombardi can be the one that delivers what he needs now. You pass the baton on because he's grown as a quarterback, and now to take that next step, he's going to have to develop an even higher cerebral mastery. And if we want to talk about Tom Brady, well, we could talk about that Super Bowl 55, right? When Tom said that he knew exactly where he was going to go every single time that he broke the huddle and he saw the defense. See Kansas City's defense. He knew the call. He knew his options. He knew his personnel package. He knew what the tendencies, because he has watched so much tape, and he was ready to carve it up. And because of that, in the NFL, if you take an extra 0.2 of a second to make a decision, that's often the difference between a touchdown and a pick six. So if you know where you're going before the snap because you are such a grandmaster of the defense, right? You know exactly where they're going to be. You're going to save yourself more than 0.2 of a second, and you can make the game look easy. And I think a lot of times that's been Brock Purdy's superpower. Even as a very, very young quarterback, it has seemed downright easy for Brock Purdy. And obviously, the 49ers need to have some separation to make that look as easy as it did. They did in 2022 and 2023. But his processing power was on full display when guys were actually winning their battles, and he was choosing the right spot to go with the football. And I think that's also something that he has passed down to Sam Darnold. We got some breaking news from an NFC rival, not the Seattle Seahawks, who, by the way, it's just funny to seeing some Seattle fans get worked up about Sam Darnold praising Brock Purdy because, what are you going to do at this point? If you're a Seattle fan and you're just, talking all this smack about Brock Purdy, who, by the way, has beaten you every single time he's played the Seahawks, except for the one time where literally everybody on the 49ers roster was hurt. And I think it took that extra Nick Bosa injury for that to happen. Brock also got hurt in that game, by the way, when he was diving for the touchdown. But if you're a Seattle fan talking a lot about Brock Purdy, and you think you've got some kind of massive quarterback leg up with Sam Darnold coming in, then all of a sudden Sam says that he learned so much from Purdy. Well, that doesn't make the Seahawks fans all too happy. So I chuckled when I saw that yesterday from Jennifer Lee Chan. Good stuff there coming from Sam Darnold, who last year, Purdy finished number 7 in QBR. It was his worst season. It was Sam Darnold's best season. He finished number 14 in QBR. So let's keep that into perspective as well. Darnold was a slightly above average quarterback last year for the Minnesota Vikings, and Brock Purdy remained, QBR wise, a top 7 guy, even with everything crumbling around him. And we'll see how they both perform now, 2025 moving forward in the NFC West. All right. I have an update here. This is NFC breaking news. Lions All-Pro center Frank Ragnow confirmed his retirement on Instagram. Informed the team he plans to retire. He's only 29 years old. A stellar career comes to a close. That is a massive hit for the Detroit Lions, who have one of the best offensive lines in football. Especially because they lost their offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. So you think about the brain trust of the offense, the engine of the offense. Obviously, OC, obviously the QB, Jared Goff, makes a lot of good decisions in that offense, makes some bad ones too. But the centers identify protections, set protections, identify safety rotations. It's happening at a great irregularity around the league, especially these elite guys. And I think that Frank Ragnow qualifies as such. These guys are really, really important to how an offense functions from an intellectual standpoint, the brains of the offense. And losing Ben Johnson to the Chicago Bears was already a big blow for the Lions. This is the risk if you're the Lions, by the way. You got Dan Campbell. He's a raw head coach, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. He's done a great job, but you leave yourself insulated. You're not insulated. You leave yourself exposed to true poaching damage if your head coach is not calling plays, because your coordinator can get hired away. Ben Johnson got hired away on offense. Their defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, got hired away. All of a sudden, you're looking to completely restart the brain trust on both sides of the ball. So now you've lost your OC in Ben Johnson. You've lost your center in Frank Ragnow. And you've got your quarterback in Jared Goff. But the question is, can Goff acclimate as the system changes around him? They were tremendously efficient last year, and the run game was really good. And Frank Ragnow helped a lot in that way too. This is a big, big blow for the Detroit Lions' high-powered offense to take a retirement at age 29 for their center, Frank Ragnow. Anyway, that's your 49ers quarterback update. Time to answer some questions. Can I imagine retirement at 29? I can't because I'm 36 now. Or am I 37? I might be 37. I forgot how old I am. Am I 36 or 37? I honestly don't remember. I stopped keeping track. I was born in 1988. What year is it right now? I think I'm 37. Yeah, I think I just turned 37 last month. Yeah, so I'm 37. So no, I can't imagine retiring in at age 29. But it is a brutal league, and if his health is not where he wants it to be, and he doesn't think that he can go through pain free, and he think it's going to compromise him for the rest of his life if he continues playing, I completely understand a retirement at this age. Back to this too. I want to get this up on the screen one more time. This should make you appreciate Brock Purdy. I think that the 49ers want to get their pass protection better, obviously, to move this dot further to the left, but I think it's always going to be on the right side by design. I think that they trust Brock to stare down the barrel of pressure and deliver downfield. And I think that this trust is so evident on tape. I mean, we've seen so many of these. Remember in Vita Vea, I'm not sure if this one was unblocked with Vita Vea or if, yeah, I think it was the one to Christian McCaffrey. I think that was an unblocked pressure where Purdy just gets destroyed, but he still is able to make the rainbow throw to Christian McCaffrey. There's, it's not just talent. Obviously, talent is necessary. He made one in the preseason too, where he got hit against the Raiders over the middle. But it's not just talent. There's a certain moxie. You got to be a gamer. You've got to be tough, and there's a certain it factor beyond the ability to make those types of throws. And the 49ers obviously entrust Purdy to make more of them than any other quarterback in the league. Now, just because he's really good at it doesn't mean that he should be attempting it 9% of the time, right? It needs to be, bring it down to about 7%, and I think that you're going to be in a really good spot if you are the 49ers. So it's been a busy few days. We're starting another week now. We go back to the Bryce Huff trade for the 49ers on Friday. Before that, they picked up Chaz Surratt and Thomas Morstead. So three former Jets now have joined the 49ers over the course of the past 7 days. So it's been a big Robert Saleh and Brant Boyer week. Today is June 2nd. June 2nd means the 49ers officially open up some short-term cap space because you could push your post-June 1st designation money backwards, and that is the cut money, the dead money owed to Malik Collins and Javon Hargrave. I gave the salary cap update yesterday. The 49ers have about $38 to $39 million of effective salary cap space on my 53-man projection. Does that mean they can sign somebody else? Theoretically, yes. Where would they be interested? Well, we've been talking about safety and we've been talking about wide receiver to a great extent over the course of the past couple of weeks. Names: Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Gabe Davis, who's visited the team facility. Julian Blackmon has also visited the team facility, albeit last year. That's a safety, and he's played under Gus Bradley. 49ers currently have two vet signees playing first-string safety at practice in Richie Grant and Jason Pinnock. We're going to be back out on the practice field Wednesday with another look at how the 49ers are doing. And at that point, the 49ers, I think they'll have much more of an idea of where they're deficient, where they're not. They want to get a few OTA practices under their belt. We never expected a receiver ad before OTAs. We knew they would start doing their diligence, doing their research, but I think they've needed these practices to get a little bit of a read of where they are on a football team. You imagine that receivers creating separation this year will only help Purdy with the pressures as well. Yeah, that's not a bad point. I think that if you can create instant separation, then even if there is unblocked pressure coming in, you can deal with it. Now, another thing about this chart is Purdy's hit rate is lower than the average line, despite the fact that his pressure rate is so high. What does that mean? That means that Brock Purdy is really good at handling pressure. He's pressured a lot, but he's not hit a lot. That means he either evades the pressure or he processes quickly enough to get rid of the football in the face of the pressure so he's not getting hit. It is not good to be at the very top here. And, Kirk Cousins got benched last year. Will Levis, terrible. Daniel Jones got benched last year. I'm sure Levis did too. I don't really follow the Titans all that closely. Deshaun Watson, probably the worst QB in the league. Zach Wilson, terrible. Kenny Pickett, not good. Like all of these quarterbacks up here at the very top, I'm sorry, everybody from Daniel Jones to Kenny Pickett, those guys got hit 10% of the time. That's not good. This is 2023 to 2024, by the way, so it's the past 2 seasons. When you look at Purdy, he only got hit 5% of the time, despite a much higher percentage of unblocked pressures. So there is really something to say about that if you're Brock Purdy. He's got a really good pressure to sack ratio as well. Again, we go back to some of the elite characteristics that Brock Purdy brings to the table. The 10-yard split is one of them. The way that he's able to burst just very quick, rapid movements away from pressure. Seems like he's got very good pocket presence as well. So that's something that's a big upgrade, for example, over Jimmy Garoppolo, who I think we always talked about Jimmy's quick release. And sometimes I thought that Jimmy used the quick release as a crutch. And he's like, well, if I could get rid of the ball really quickly, I could just rip that football into a tight window with my quick release. It was almost like he was saying, I don't need to have perfect footwork. And that'll come back to bite you in the NFL, sometimes from an accuracy perspective, but oftentimes you're not in a good position to evade in the pocket, and those pass rushes can hit you quick. So I think that where Purdy has been really good has been the footwork. And he actually said that he's going back to some of his rookie year tape to make sure that he's all buttoned up on fundamentals entering 2025, because stuff like footwork, I think, at the end of the day, it's non-negotiable. Jimmy Garoppolo is one of the quickest releases that we've ever seen. When I talked to Jimmy's college coach, Dino Babers, he said that Garoppolo is the quickest release he's seen since Dan Marino. And Marino, like, quickest release that we've ever seen at the NFL level. And Jimmy made a lot of good passes and won a lot of football games with that release, but ultimately we also saw a high injury rate for Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think some of that went back to some of the footwork issues that he had. So if you're gonna, and look, who had some of the best footwork we've ever seen, who didn't get hurt hardly ever, like very, very rarely, was Tom Brady. So if Brock Purdy can continue to hone in on his footwork, which I think has been really good already, but if that's something that he continues improving over the course of his NFL career, that's something that can increase longevity. That's something that could set him up for sustained success. Because if your feet are under you and you know how to move in the pocket, you have that sense, and you manipulate the pocket the right way, well, you can earn a lot of extra time. And in a league where 0.3 of a second is a ton of extra time, for guys to get open, for defenses to break downfield, for whatever to happen, that is a true difference maker. That is a true game changer. All right, guys, I'm hopping on KMBR right now. I've got to take a minute or two off. So go ahead and tune into KMBR. I think you go to KMBR.com and they have the podcast there. But hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. We had some good content today. We had this, and of course, these two guys, Sam Darnold and Brock Purdy. We'll talk to everybody soon.